Kofi arrived at noon on the day before the alignment, walking through the old quarter's eastern gate with the unhurried pace of a man whose bad knee had set the tempo for the entire journey and whose reformed mind had used every step to process information. Tibijia saw him first. The soldier was positioned at the courtyard's eastern vantage, where the narrow lane from the gate was visible for 30 meters, enough warning to draw a weapon, sound an alarm, or step aside, depending on what the lane produced. What the lane produced was a ragged man in his 50s with a limp that favored his right leg and eyes that Tibijia recognized immediately. Observer's eyes. The kind of gaze that was not looking at things but reading them, cataloging the courtyard's architecture, the positioning of its occupants, the sight lines and exits and structural weaknesses, all in the 3 seconds between the gate and the first flagstone. A man who noticed things. Tibijia recognized the kinship, the way soldiers recognize soldiers across uniforms and borders and languages, the shared grammar of attention. Kofi's eyes found Tibijia's, a flicker of mutual recognition, 2 men who had spent their lives watching and were now, briefly, watching each other. Then the 4th fragment connected, and the recognition was drowned in something larger. The 3-part harmonic that had hummed through the courtyard for 18 hours became a 4-part chord. The shift was not subtle. The flagstones cracked hairline fractures radiating from the point where Kofi's feet touched the courtyard's packed earth. The ancestral wards on the courtyard walls blazed with sudden, frantic light. Azindo's shadow snapped toward Kofi like a compass needle, finding true north, stretching across the entire courtyard in a single geometric lunge. WuDon gasped a sharp, involuntary sound, and her nosebleed intensified. Blood running freely down her chin as the communion channel absorbed the 4th frequency and transmitted it downward through the root lines with the speed of a shout. The smock against Zuera's chest went white-hot. She held it through the pain because her mother had held a loom through worse. And Tibijia stood in the center of the cord and felt nothing. The absence was total. Everyone around him was vibrating with connection, trembling with the system's recognition of its own completeness, their bodies resonating with a frequency that knitted 4 fragments into a mechanism that had not been whole in 1,000 years. Tibijia's body did not resonate. His teeth stopped aching. His scars stopped tingling. The harmonic had found its completion, and having found it, no longer needed to reach, no longer needed to search through his non-magical flesh. For a frequency, it would never find there. He had been useful as an antenna when the signal was incomplete. Now the signal was complete and the antenna was irrelevant. The loneliness of it was precise, surgical, clean, not the loneliness of being excluded, the loneliness of being unnecessary. He swallowed it. There was work to do. Kofi was speaking. The reformed mind operated with the clarity of a system that had been broken and rebuilt and now processed information without the friction of sentiment or the noise of ego. He laid out the tactical situation the way Tibijia would have laid out a field assessment. Clean, numbered, ranked by priority. The convergence mechanism required all 4 fragments activating simultaneously. The enskinment chamber was the activation point. The cage maker's trap was woven into the chamber's infrastructure, a web of corrupted encoding designed to capture all 4 fragment frequencies at the moment of convergence and redirect them into his 3rd skin. Walking into the chamber meant walking into the trap.
The prescribed failsafe requires simultaneous activation,
Kofi said. His voice carried the particular quality of a mind that had been through madness and emerged with all its walls repainted.
All 4 fragments connecting at the same instant during the alignment's peak amplification. The trap is designed for that exact configuration. If we follow the prescribed sequence, the trap captures all 4 frequencies simultaneously. Game over.
So we do not follow the prescribed sequence,
Tibijia said. Kofi looked at him, the observer's eyes again reading not just the soldier's words but his posture, his confidence, his experience.
Precisely, we improvise.
The plan Kofi outlined was not a plan. It was a calculated gamble dressed in the language of strategy. Instead of simultaneous activation, they would stagger the entries. Instead of 4 frequencies hitting the trap at once, they would send one first alone, exposed, vulnerable to trigger the trap's capture mechanism prematurely, creating a calibration window during which the other 3 could activate before the trap adjusted. The first note in a song that required someone to play before the orchestra was ready. The first note was the encoding frequency, WuDon's frequency, the last pattern.
You are describing my daughter as bait.
Samini said, his petrified staff trembled in his hands.
I am describing her as the first note in a duet that requires someone to begin.
Kofi said. The reformed mind delivered the assessment without sentiment, because sentiment at this juncture was a form of dishonesty, and the stakes were too high for dishonesty.
The web captures the encoding frequency, but the encoding frequency alone is insufficient for the trap's purpose. The trap needs all 4 frequencies to power the redirection. With only one frequency captured, the web enters a calibration state. It holds the encoding frequency and searches for the other 3. That calibration window, the seconds between the web's first capture and its realization that the other frequencies are not arriving on schedule, is when the rest of us act.
How many seconds?
Tibijia asked.
Between 3 and 7. The alignment builds from baseline to peak over approximately 90 seconds. If WuDon enters early before the alignment reaches 30% of peak, the web captures her frequency at low power. Low power capture takes longer to calibrate. The window extends towards 7 seconds.
And if the alignment is faster than your estimate?
3 seconds at minimum.
3 seconds to open a channel, initiate a bond, and coordinate a convergence.
Yes.
The military term for that,
Tibijia said,
is operationally suicidal.
The military term for doing nothing is catastrophic defeat.
The courtyard went quiet, Demba drums in the distance. Harmattan wind through empty doorways. 6 people and a decision that could not be taken back once the chamber was entered. WuDon held the smock in her lap. Mariama's final work. The self-completing cipher that had woven itself through warm, dead hands in a locked room while shadows tried to enter, and a soldier stared, and a student revealed her armor. Her mother had known. The realization settled over WuDon with the weight of a truth she had been approaching since the loom room and was now willing to hold. Mariama had known what the smock would be asked to do. Not the details, not the improvised duet, not the calibration window, not the margin between capture and rescue, but the shape. The fact that the last pattern's role was not simply to open a door. It was to go first, to draw the trap's attention, to serve as the shield that absorbed the first blow, so the rest of the song could assemble behind it. The extraordinary density of the encoding was not just information, it was armor. The smock was designed to be captured first, its cipher so complex, so layered, that any capture mechanism would need seconds to process it. Seconds that created the calibration window. Seconds that the duet needed to begin.
My mother knew,
WuDon said quietly.
She designed the smock as a shield. The density of the encoding is not just data, it is protection. The trap captures the frequency and chokes on it. The encoding is too complex to process quickly. That complexity is what creates the calibration window.
Kofi's expression shifted. The momentary stillness of a reformed mind encountering data that revised a prior assessment upward.
You are saying the calibration window is not an accidental byproduct of the trap's limitations. It is an intentional feature of the encoding.
I am saying my mother spent her last weeks alive encoding a textile that would protect the convergence by absorbing the first blow.
WuDon's voice was steady. Her eyes burned.
She did not die encoding a warning. She died encoding protection for me for this moment.
The courtyard held its breath. Tibijia moved to stand beside WuDon, not in front beside. The flank position. The place a soldier stands when the person beside him is not retreating and does not need shielding from the front, but might need someone watching the angles they cannot see.
I go with her,
He said. Kofi studied him.
You are not part of the failsafe.
No, I am part of the investigation.
Tibigia's voice carried the 12-year weight of military service, compressed into a single statement.
The investigation says that a master weaver walked into a room and died protecting her daughter. The investigation says that the daughter should not walk into a room and die the same way.
He paused. The courtyard was listening. Not just the people, the harmonic, the 4-part chord humming in the flagstones and the walls and the air.
You need someone in that chamber who is not looking at frequencies and fragments and harmonics.
Tibigia said.
Someone looking at the room, the man, the physical space. Your system is brilliant, Kofi. I have felt it read me. I have been unraveled by its network and reassembled in a market square, and I have stood in the middle of its choir and heard nothing because the system does not speak to people like me.
He met Kofi's eyes.
That is my value. The system cannot show me what I need to see, and it cannot hide from me what it does not think to hide. I am blind to the frequencies, and I see everything else. You need that. In a chamber built by a man who has spent 20 years manipulating frequencies, you need someone whose eyes cannot be manipulated by frequency.
Kofi looked at Pognazara. The old queen nodded the barely perceptible authorization of a woman who had commanded soldiers for 4 decades, and recognized, in Tibigia's insistence, the specific value of stubborn human competence in a situation dominated by inhuman forces.
You go with her.
Kofi agreed. Zuera looked at Tibigia, the soldier who had noticed the shuttle moving in dead hands, the man who had stood between her and the shadows in the loom room doorway, the investigator who had followed a murder case to the foundations of reality and refused to close the file.
Thank you.
As she said, Tibigia did not say, "Don't thank me yet." He did not deflect with humor. There was a time for humor and a time for honesty, and this was the second kind.
I have been watching you since the loom room.
He said,
Not because it is my assignment, because it is impossible not to. You lost your mother 3 days ago and you have not stopped. You picked up the pattern she wove through dead hands and you carried it underground, and you opened a road that has not been used in living memory, and you burned your arms to bring us here, and you have not once asked whether the cost is too high because you already know the cost and you have already decided to pay it.
His voice was quiet, the voice of a man who noticed things speaking about the thing he had noticed most.
Your mother wove protection into that smock. I watched the encoding. I could not read it, but I could see it. The density, the layers, the way the pattern kept folding inward, adding depth, adding complexity. She was not writing a message. She was building a wall, and she built it around you, Zuera, not around the convergence, not around the system, around her daughter.
He touched the smock in her lap. The first time he had touched it voluntarily, the soldier who distrusted magic reaching out to touch the most powerful piece of enchanted textile in the territories. The cloth was warm under his fingers. Alive. He could feel Mariama's intention in the weave the way you could feel a mason's intention in a well-built wall. Not through magic, through craft, through the evidence of care in every thread.
Walk into that chamber carrying what your mother gave you.
Tibigia said,
And I will walk in beside you carrying what I have. It is not much. A sword, 2 eyes, 30 years of paying attention.
He pulled his hand back.
Sometimes the most important thing a man with a sword can do is stand guard and let the music happen.
He had not known he believed that until he said it. The soldier who had spent 12 years trusting steel and training and the clear physics of force, admitting to himself, to her, to the 4-part chord humming through the courtyard that there were battles where his weapons were irrelevant and his presence was not. Zuera did not cry. She pressed the smock against her chest, her mother's shield, her mother's love encoded in thread, and nodded once. The evening deepened. The Damba drums built toward their sunset, crescendo the traditional performance preceding the alignment day, the Lunsi masters playing the rhythms that would accompany the ceremony's opening at midnight tomorrow. The drum's vibration traveled through the courtyard's packed earth and into the root lines below and through the system's nervous system to every node in the territories. One day, they prepared, each in the way their nature demanded. Kofi sat cross-legged in the courtyard center, his reformed mind running calculations that Tibigia could see in the micro-movements of his lips, the conductor scoring the improvised duet, timing the entries, mapping the calibration window second by second. Azindo paced the courtyard's perimeter, his shadow testing the walls for weaknesses, the sensor array running diagnostics on the space they would defend tomorrow. WuDon knelt with her palms against the earth and her eyes closed, communing with the route lines beneath the city, mapping the underground passages, the chamber's layout, the locations of the corrupted nodes. Pogna Zara sat very still, her hands folded, her authority carried in the straightness of her spine. Samini held his petrified staff and watched his daughter with the expression of a father who had spent his life protecting something that had outgrown his ability to protect it and had not yet made peace with the transition. And Tibijia could not sleep. He had never been able to sleep the night before an operation. It was not anxiety, it was preparation. The body's refusal to surrender awareness when awareness might be needed. 12 years of service had taught him what to do with sleepless hours: maintain equipment, review terrain, inventory supplies. He cleaned his weapon. The iron blade was simple, unenchanted, unembellished, maintained with the discipline of a man who believed that a tool you did not care for was a tool that would fail you. He worked the whetstone along the edge in slow, rhythmic strokes, the sound blending with the distant drums and the four-part harmonic humming in the flagstones. The blade would not cut a frequency. It would not deflect an encoding, but it would cut a man, and the cage maker, for all his stolen magic and his obsidian face, and his 20 years of plotting, was still, at some level, a man. He counted exits: 2 from the courtyard, 1 underground passage at the northeast corner leading to the enskinment chamber 3 levels down. He memorized the angles, the distances, the choke points where a single-armed man could hold a passage against superior numbers. He watched the others prepare. The way a soldier watches his unit before deployment, not to evaluate, but to memorize. To carry each of them with him into the chamber. Because tomorrow, when the alignment hit and the duet began, and the frequencies roared through the enskinment chamber's ancient architecture, Tibijia would be the only person in the room experiencing it through ordinary human senses. No magic, no fragment, no encoded perception. Just a man with a sword and good eyes, standing guard while the music happened. The drums beat on. Midnight tomorrow, the alignment. Zuera slept with the smock against her heart, Mariama's shield guarding her even in dreams. Her breath was steady, her face calm, and the thread pattern burns on her arms glowed faintly gold in the darkness the shuttle roads cost, written on her skin, still warm with the encoding frequency that had carried them both to this place. Tibijia watched her sleep, not with the eyes of a man looking at a woman, with the eyes of a guard on the eve of the hardest posting of his life, memorizing the thing he had been assigned to protect. He did not know if they would walk out of that chamber. He did not know if 3 to 7 seconds was enough. He did not know if a sword and 2 eyes and 30 years of attention could make a difference in a fight between fragments of a system built by beings who had designed fail-safes, the way other civilizations designed irrigation ditches. He knew only this. Tomorrow, when Zuera walked into the cage-maker's trap carrying her mother's last act of love against her chest, he would walk in beside her. And whatever the system could not see, he would see it for them. The whetstone rasped against iron. The drums beat, the harmonic hummed. One day,